A strange moment in orbit changed everything for the crew on China's Tiangong station. The scene looked calm until a silent flash appeared near their returning spacecraft, bright enough to catch their eyes but too quick for the cameras to lock onto. The astronauts froze for a brief second, as if they sensed something unusual moving outside the window. When Mission Control reviewed the footage, they noticed the light lasted less than a heartbeat, which raised serious concern among the engineers watching from Earth. No alarm sounded inside the station, yet the timing felt sharp and suspicious, and the lack of answers created a quiet tension across the entire team. In space, even a tiny fragment can travel faster than any aircraft on the planet, so the idea of an unseen impact made the situation far more dangerous than it first appeared. That one flash opened a deeper mystery that no one could explain. So what exactly touched the ship, and why did it vanish without a trace? The Shenzhou 20 mission began as one of China's most stable operations, and the crew expected a smooth return after spending months aboard the Tiangong station. The rotation plan was simple, and it grew even more promising when Shenzhou 21 arrived with new supplies, fresh equipment, and a replacement team trained to take over every duty on the outpost. Both groups worked side by side during the handover, and their cheerful interactions created the feeling that the mission was unfolding exactly as planned. Inside the station, the atmosphere was relaxed. The astronauts cooked their first meal together using newly delivered tools, and they recorded videos showing a rare sense of comfort in orbit. However, behind that calm routine, engineers on the ground continued tracking a rising concern in low Earth orbit. Thousands of fragments from old rockets, lost bolts, and abandoned satellites now travel faster than any aircraft on Earth, and even a piece the size of a coin can damage a spacecraft at those extreme speeds. This growing cloud of debris has turned routine flights into high-risk journeys that demand constant monitoring. As Shenzhou 20 prepared for departure, one question began to trouble the teams on Earth. What if the silent flash seen earlier was a sign that something had already gone wrong? The first sign that something was wrong came from a barely noticeable vibration inside the Shenzhou 20 spacecraft, and it appeared so quickly that most systems did not even react. The crew did not hear a sound, yet one of the internal sensors captured a sharp pulse that did not match any normal activity from the station or the docked vehicles. Engineers on Earth replayed the data repeatedly, trying to understand how a perfect mission could suddenly show an unexplained disturbance. The pattern did not line up with engine movement or routine adjustments, so the team began to suspect that an external object might have brushed against the hull. As the review continued, the video feed from the station revealed that same silent flash that had confused the astronauts earlier. The light appeared for less than a second, but the reflection against the metal surface suggested that something small passed by at extreme speed. In low Earth orbit, even a fragment no larger than a marble can move faster than a rifle bullet, which means a single strike can pierce metal, break wiring, or weaken the shield designed to protect the crew. When the engineers matched the flash with the vibration, they realized they were looking at a possible impact that happened too fast for any alarm to detect. Inside the spacecraft, everything looked stable. The screens glowed normally, the pressure levels held steady, and the temperature curves stayed within safe limits. This calm environment made the situation more unsettling, because a spacecraft that appears healthy on the surface can still hide dangerous structural problems beneath. The engineers understood that stress from a high-speed collision does not always show its effects immediately. A microscopic crack can expand during re-entry, the heat flow can target a weakened area, and a small fracture can turn into a fatal break when the capsule hits the thick layers of the atmosphere. The investigation grew more serious when the team studied the likely path of the object that caused the flash. Recent tracking data showed increasing clusters of debris, many of them too small to detect with standard radar. Old rocket pieces drift in unpredictable patterns, and tiny bolts from past missions wander for years before crossing the path of an active spacecraft. The idea that one of these pieces struck Shenzhou 20 at exactly the wrong moment created a level of worry that no one wanted to share publicly. A minor impact might not threaten the crew inside the station, but it can become life-threatening once the spacecraft begins its journey home. At this stage, the mission controllers faced a difficult decision. They could allow the return to proceed as planned and risk sending the crew through re-entry with unknown damage, or they could postpone the landing until a safer option emerged. The risk grew even higher when analysts noted that the damaged spacecraft would also be the crew's escape vehicle in any emergency. If a fire, decompression, or coolant leak occurred on the station, the astronauts would be forced to return to Earth in a capsule that might fail under stress. The uncertainty deepened when the engineers asked a troubling question that no one wanted to answer immediately. If the impact was caused by an ordinary fragment, the danger was serious but understandable. However, what if the object that hit the spacecraft did not behave like typical debris and came from a pattern that radar did not recognize? The teams needed more information before they made assumptions, yet they knew the next step would shape the entire mission. The flash, the vibration, and the silence that followed created a mystery that demanded attention. Something had touched the Shenzhou 20, and no one could explain how it arrived or why it moved without leaving a clear trail. The uncertainty pushed the investigation toward the larger question that would define the next chapter. If the spacecraft was struck by something invisible, how dangerous would the return to Earth become? The decision to delay the return of Shenzhou 20 began as a precaution, yet the longer the engineers studied the data, the more worrying the situation became. A spacecraft built for re-entry must endure intense heat, violent pressure changes, and rapid deceleration, and even a small structural weakness can turn those conditions into a disaster. The team understood that they were not simply dealing with a minor anomaly. They were facing the possibility that a hidden impact had compromised the integrity of a vehicle that the crew depended on for their journey back to Earth. Inside Mission Control, specialists from different fields reviewed each system one by one. The thermal protection layer showed no visible signs of damage, although this alone was not enough to confirm safety. A microscopic crack hidden beneath the surface could expand during re-entry, especially when temperatures exceed thousands of degrees. The navigation engineers raised another concern when they noted that a weakened frame might cause instability during the rapid spin adjustments required to guide the capsule through its descent path. This combination of unknown risks made the idea of returning home far more dangerous than the astronauts expected. Meanwhile, the crew aboard Tiangong tried to keep their routine steady, but the tension in their voices revealed that they felt the weight of the situation. They knew that re-entry is the most dangerous part of any mission, and they understood that a damaged spacecraft offers no second chances. The shock layer that forms around a descending capsule is a violent bubble of energy, and if it interacts with a weakened point, the result can be catastrophic. For astronauts, this phase of flight is something they train for repeatedly, yet no amount of preparation removes the fear of a vehicle that may not withstand the stress. The engineers considered several scenarios to estimate the potential danger. If the impact had weakened the outer shell, the heat shield might not distribute temperature evenly. If the electronic lines had been struck, the guidance systems could fail during the final descent. If the parachute housing had been affected, the lines might not deploy smoothly once the capsule reached the lower atmosphere. Each scenario represented a different path to failure, and none of them offered a safe outcome. The analysis took another turn when the propulsion team reviewed the performance logs of the service module. This section contains the engines needed to reduce speed. The possibility that the impact had interfered with this process added another layer of concern. As these risks accumulated, the mission leaders concluded that allowing Shenzhou 20 to return as planned would be reckless. The timing of the impact, the silent flash, and the unexplained vibration made the danger impossible to ignore. The crew might survive inside the station for a while, but the moment an emergency occurred, they would have no choice but to use the damaged spacecraft. This terrifying thought forced everyone to realize that the danger was not limited to re-entry. It extended to any unexpected failure inside Tiangong itself. The decision to postpone the return was made to protect the crew, yet the delay created a new question that no one wanted to voice. With one spacecraft possibly compromised, the astronauts now depended on a single functioning vehicle, and that vehicle had not been designed to carry two full crews back at once. The longer the situation remained unresolved, the more vulnerable the team became, especially in an environment where debris continues to move unpredictably. This growing uncertainty led to a turning point in the investigation. If Shenzhou 20 was no longer safe for re-entry, what options were left to bring everyone home alive? The moment the engineers confirmed that Shenzhou 20 might be unsafe, the mission shifted from a technical challenge to a growing chain reaction that no one had predicted. A single damaged spacecraft was already a major problem, but the consequences of losing it extended far beyond the return schedule. Every astronaut on the Tiangong station depended on both docked vehicles, because each ship served not only as a transport but also as an escape route if the station suffered a serious emergency. Without two working vehicles, the balance of safety that kept the station stable became dangerously fragile. The next issue appeared when the analysts compared the capacity of Shenzhou 21 with the number of people currently living on the station. The craft was designed to transport only one crew, and although it might technically fit more, the systems inside were not built for such a load. Life support has limits. Oxygen flow can only support a fixed number of passengers, and the seats and harnesses cannot be improvised without risking the safety of everyone involved. Sending two crews home on a single spacecraft would be a risky operation even under ideal circumstances, and the station was no longer in ideal condition. This forced the mission planners to prepare a scenario that none of them ever wanted to face. If a fire broke out inside Tiangong, the astronauts would be required to evacuate instantly. If the station lost pressure, they would have only minutes to reach the nearest capsule. If a coolant leak spread through the modules, they would need to seal the doors and escape before the levels became unsafe. In any of these emergencies, the crew would run toward two vehicles, only to discover that one of them might not protect them through re-entry. That fear alone was enough to change the tone of every conversation inside mission control. Meanwhile, the crew on orbit tried to stay calm while discussing evacuation protocols. They rehearsed how fast they could move between modules, who would take control of the capsule, and how they would distribute essential equipment if they needed to leave the station in a hurry. None of these steps were new to them, yet the presence of a damaged spacecraft altered the meaning of each procedure. An action that once felt routine now carried a heavier weight, because it might determine who had access to the only safe vehicle during a crisis. The engineers then uncovered another problem that complicated the situation even further. A spacecraft that is docked for months becomes part of the station's emergency structure. Its systems help stabilize the outpost, and its sensors assist with environmental monitoring. If Shenzhou 20 suffered internal wiring damage during the impact, some of these support features might fail unexpectedly. A weakened power line could trigger false readings. A damaged seal could create slow leaks that remain hidden until pressure levels start to drop. Each possible failure added another piece to the growing chain of risks. As the investigation continued, the mission leaders began to realize that the danger was no longer limited to the spacecraft itself. It had expanded outward, affecting crew safety, station stability, and every emergency plan the team had prepared. For the first time in years, Tiangong faced a situation where one technical problem could escalate into a life-threatening event if not handled correctly. The system had been designed with redundancy in mind, but losing one ship meant losing half of that redundancy. The gravity of the situation grew even more clear when international analysts began watching the event from afar. Reports started to circulate about rising debris levels in the station's orbital path, and some experts warned that unexplained flashes could be linked to other fragments that had not yet been detected. If the first impact was more than an isolated incident, the station could face additional threats that would overwhelm its defenses. This possibility forced the mission planners to confront a new and frightening question. If the first impact triggered a domino effect, how long could the station remain safe before the next piece of the chain fell into place? The uncertainty surrounding the damaged Shenzhou 20 forced Mission Control to consider a solution that was never meant to be used except in the most extreme situations. Every major space program on Earth keeps a silent rescue option on standby, and China is no different. Their emergency system depends on a spacecraft prepared on the ground, a rocket fueled only to the minimum safe level, and a launch crew that can be activated within hours if the orbiting station faces a life-threatening crisis. Until now, this plan had lived only inside classified documents. The Shenzhou 20 incident suddenly pushed it toward reality. As engineers studied the data, they began monitoring the Long March 2F launch complex through internal feeds. They noticed small but clear signs that the rescue team had started preliminary preparations. Technicians inspected fuel lines, external scaffolding was partially removed, and communications checks were conducted at unusual hours. None of these actions proved that a launch was imminent, yet the pattern hinted at an emergency mode that China rarely acknowledges publicly. For the first time in months, the ground crew watched not just the space station, but also the rocket waiting silently on Earth. The spacecraft designated for rescue, believed to be Shenzhou 22, had been kept in a controlled environment since the day it was assembled. Although it had never been announced as part of the mission timeline, its presence in the hangar was widely suspected by analysts who tracked China's space activities. These specialists know that no space agency would allow astronauts to fly without a way to retrieve them, especially during long-duration stays. Even so, preparing a standby craft for launch requires careful inspection. Any mechanical flaw could trap the rescue team themselves, which is why every bolt, panel, and sensor must be checked again before the countdown begins. Inside Tiangong, the two crews tried to stay focused on daily tasks, but the knowledge that a rescue launch was being considered changed the mood completely. Astronauts understand that a backup spacecraft is the last defense between them and the unforgiving environment of space. If the situation worsened, they might have to board Shenzhou 21 in a hurry, trusting that the rescue mission would meet them halfway. That possibility created a heavy tension because every hour spent waiting increased the risk of further debris collisions or unexpected failures within the station. Meanwhile, international observers began to notice unusual activity in the tracking data associated with China's launch complex. Small changes in ground communications, short bursts of radar activity, and the repositioning of ground support vehicles suggested that something important was unfolding. These patterns triggered new speculation about what China knew regarding the object that struck Shenzhou 20. Some analysts questioned whether the impact was truly random, while others wondered if China was preparing for more than a simple rescue. The secrecy surrounding the backup plan only intensified these theories. The mission planners continued to refine a procedure that would allow Shenzhou 22 to launch into the same orbital plane as Tiangong. Timing would be critical because a poorly aligned trajectory would delay docking and leave the astronauts waiting even longer. The rescue craft would need to match both altitude and speed, and even slight miscalculations could force the mission to repeat the entire rendezvous sequence. Although China has performed precision docking many times, executing such maneuvers during a crisis brings its own challenges. As all of these pieces moved into place, Mission Control realized they were standing at a crossroads. If they launched the rescue craft too early, they might waste a valuable opportunity. If they waited too long, they risked leaving two crews exposed to dangers beyond their control. Every detail had to be perfect because the cost of one mistake would be measured in human lives. The silent preparations on Earth and the growing tension in orbit pointed toward a turning point in the mission. If China activated its backup spacecraft, what would that reveal about the true severity of the situation? The impact on Shenzhou 20 forced analysts to explore a possibility far more complex than a simple collision. Space debris normally behaves in predictable ways because most fragments follow stable orbital paths that have been mapped for years. The object that struck the spacecraft did not match those expectations since it appeared suddenly and faded before the monitoring systems could mark its trajectory. This unusual pattern made investigators question whether the crew had encountered a natural fragment or something shaped by advanced technology. As experts reviewed the incident, attention turned to China's rapid development of debris removal satellites. These systems are often described as tools that clean dangerous fragments from orbit and reduce long-term risks for astronauts. Many of them use robotic arms, capture nets, or tight maneuvering to approach objects with high precision. However, the same capabilities that allow a satellite to remove debris can also be used to disable or interfere with another spacecraft. This dual purpose is why military analysts follow China's orbital experiments so closely, since peaceful tools can shift into strategic assets when tensions rise. The CN-25 satellite stood out in this discussion because tracking data suggested it performed several controlled approaches to nearby targets. These movements showed a level of accuracy normally associated with servicing or refueling missions, yet China never offered a full public explanation. The silence surrounding these maneuvers added pressure to the Shenzhou 20 investigation, and many researchers wondered whether similar technology could behave unpredictably when a test failed. Even a small error in an experimental satellite could cause a collision that appears accidental. Inside the Tiangong station, the astronauts were not given full details, but they sensed that the situation was larger than a routine safety review. Each update from mission control carried a heavier tone, and technicians on the ground spoke more slowly than usual as they remained cautious with information. This shift in communication created a quiet unease inside the station because the crew understood how rare it was for officials to withhold specifics. The mystery surrounding the impact made them treat every vibration like a potential warning. Meanwhile, space agencies around the world began discussing the growing militarization of low Earth orbit. They noted that multiple countries were developing satellites capable of docking, towing, or repositioning objects, and these technologies could be misused during conflict. Although such systems are often marketed as tools for satellite maintenance, the ability to manipulate a spacecraft is powerful enough to change the balance of space security. The idea that some fragments might be related to these technologies brought a global angle to the Shenzhou 20 incident. Mission planners responded by strengthening their monitoring systems and expanding their tracking networks. They calibrated sensors to detect smaller objects, and they coordinated with international observatories to widen their observational field. These efforts revealed a pattern of unusual movements among certain fragments, which deepened the suspicion that not all objects in orbit were behaving naturally. Even if the Shenzhou 20 strike had been unintentional, the orbital environment was clearly changing in ways that introduced new threats. The possibility that the impact originated from human-made technology forced analysts to reconsider earlier assumptions. A malfunctioning satellite or a failed test device could easily drift into the wrong path and strike a spacecraft without warning. Although there was no evidence of hostile intent, the realization that human activity might produce hidden dangers made the situation far more urgent. The incident became a reminder that the border between natural debris and advanced tools could blur quickly. In the end, the Shenzhou 20 damage revealed more than a single vulnerability. It exposed a fragile balance between peaceful missions and quiet competition in orbit, where nations test technologies that the public rarely sees. The event pushed investigators to rethink what debris truly means in an age of rapid innovation. If human technology is now shaping the dangers in space, what risk will the astronauts face next as they wait for a way home? The Shenzhou 20 incident leaves us with a final truth that is impossible to ignore. The danger in orbit is no longer only about stray fragments drifting through space, because new technology is changing the way these objects behave. This single impact revealed how fragile every mission becomes when human tools and natural debris share the same sky. It also showed that even the best planning can be shaken by one silent moment that no one sees coming. Now the world waits to learn what really struck the spacecraft. And while we wait, one question remains. What will happen if the next impact is not a warning but a disaster?